I am so happy to introduce my friend Nicole Cramer. In the spirit of celebrating delicious movement, she has taken a real passion for the movements in baseball and basketball and let it be a common thread in her professional life, right from being a college player in the US right through to being a business owner, creating over six figures a year, and how it's been a through thread, a through theme through her whole entire professional life and her personal life. And I think this is especially important in the times where people are considering in the school system making physical education something that is either optional or removed. And the physical literacy, I think, adds to being a well-rounded person. And it definitely helps, we know this for a fact, that the forebrain of our gray matter isn't completely formed while we're still in public school or like under grade 12. Like for males, it doesn't completely form until age 25. So this is why having activity, getting the blood flow into that region helps with executive decisions. It helps with mood. It helps with decision making. It's all these delicious things. So I'm your podcast host for Celebrating Delicious Movement. I'm Linda Gee-Hesketh, and it's my pleasure to bring Nicole Cramer on with you today.
Couple of days. So on the move.
Oh, I'm so glad to be able to catch you on the fly.
Yeah, me too.
Well, let's start by saying, where were you born and what did your parents do, to give some context?
I was born in Ohio, and I actually, in the city that I'm in right now, is where I was born. And my parents were 19 when they got married. They met in sixth grade. They met at like 12 years old. So they're those middle school sweethearts that made it last, and got married at 19, then had me at 24. And that was the beginning of me.
And if I recall correctly, since the podcast is called Celebrating Delicious Movement, your dad, I'm not sure about your mom, but I know your dad had some impact on your physicality.
Big time. Big time. Like the biggest influence of any part of my childhood was my dad. And I don't even want to say nudge, but the direction, the interest in playing sports came from him. And he's a lifelong athlete. It runs in the family. My grandpa was a coach. My grandpa was an athlete. And, you know, it's about more than just, hey, go be good at basketball. There's so much more when you are a part of something like that you benefit from, you know, even in your own self-growth, what you learn about yourself. So my dad was a huge influence. He was a basketball player, basketball coach, and he was my private basketball coach, which I didn't know at the time how lucky I was, Linda, to have that. And looking back, it's like I had something that was really incredible to help me in my journey that, you know, not a lot of people don't have that advantage.
For real. So was your grandfather in basketball also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was basketball and baseball. Baseball was like his really awesome sport that he was excelled at. Yeah. But he played both. And same with my dad, played baseball as well and basketball, but basketball was his main. And I also played softball and basketball. And then I gave up softball when I was a freshman in high school so that I could focus on basketball. It was really one of those things where there was some clear talent there, some ability that I really wanted to put all my focus in that area, because my goal was to get to college and get a scholarship to play basketball in college. So I cut out everything else and just focused on basketball.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
This is really interesting because that's a running, jumping sport and a rotational sport.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
having lots of skills, like you have lots of foundation.
Yes.
So interesting.
Yes.
Makes
And
you
the
feel
foundation is where your success comes from. I mean, the reason, it's like anything, the structures and systems is what is so important in your business, and the foundational ability of your body and those skills that you're learning are really what make you successful at the game.
This is so interesting because when I was hiring for a team, I found that the best hires in hindsight were people who had been in team sport
Mm-hmm.
because they could trust the others to do what they were supposed to do, and they stayed in their own lane. They worked in their like zone of genius. Like it's so much is transferable. Like I didn't play a team sport. I did an individual activity. And so I was very observant. Like the contrast was really, really interesting for me
Mm-hmm.
about how people function in
It's
business.
you're spot on. I mean, it's the experience of being a part of something bigger than just you
Mm,
is an incredible experience and comes with so many lessons and so many growth opportunities, because to your point, you learn how to play to your role. You learn how to do your job and trust the other people to do theirs. And that's so important in so many areas of life, right? That element of trust, and then knowing where you need to put your focus, knowing where you show up and operate best. Like I was a shooter. I was a really, really good pure shooter. So I needed to shoot the ball. I was the best shooter on our team. And, there were times where maybe I was having a bad day and nothing was going through the bucket and it was challenging, and I'd get down on myself, and it was like, I'd stop shooting.
oh,
Right. Well, that's my job. That's my role.
yeah.
I am a shooter. And I fortunately had a coach who saw it as it was starting to happen, and he'd catch me and he pulled me aside once. He said, Nick, when you're on, shoot. When you're off, shoot until you're on. Keep shooting. That's your job. And I can't tell you, Linda, how many times I've taken that piece of advice and applied it in other areas of my life off
Everything.
the basketball court. When you're on, shoot. When you're off, shoot until you're on. Keep shooting. So knowing your role, knowing that that's, where you belong is a really important lesson that you learn on a team, and then trusting others to do their role.
This is beautiful because I can see how some of the athletes that we are in contact with now, it's really a journey of self-leadership and then leadership of others, whether it's in the sport, in business, in personal life, in family relationships. It's fascinating. And I think that sometimes they don't realize it until many years later. I've had one coach say, yeah, when they're around 35, they kind of come back and they go, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I
Finally
learned,
clicked.
yeah, yeah, how it connected the dots.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
So
and you're right, because leadership is about leading yourself. You can't lead others in any other way. And I still learn that all the time. You speak of team. A couple of years ago, as I was hiring a team and bringing people on, one of the things that I realized as the leader of my company is I wanted to be a better leader for these people, that we were all working together, and I saw opportunities for us. And I actually signed up to work with a coach that helped me with my leadership skills. And it became very apparent very quickly that the way you lead others is by leading yourself.
this is really interesting because in fitness, I have people say, oh, my neighbor or my best friend or my spouse, I want them to, bottom line is be more active or join me in this sport or um get in be more consistent, things like this. And they're like, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And I always say, you do it yourself, and you be your best version of yourself, and then that inspires others. That's the only way that it really works, because
Yeah.
nobody likes to be told what to do.
Nobody does
Ever.
ever, although they secretly do want to be told what to do, but it needs to be their idea. And when we are an example of something that they see, that they aspire to be, that is our way of telling them what to do and inspiring them. And I know you've probably heard me say this before, but I like to say we are all walking permission slips.
Yes. Yeah.
and for anybody else. And what we do isn't necessarily right for everybody in the world, but there are people who will see things in us as we're doing them, and it will inspire them. It will wake something up in them. And that's really the we lead by example.
Yeah. I think that I want to say celebrate our wins, but what I mean is when we are being our best version of ourselves, we are evidence that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because people think, oh, well, I know her, I know the rest of her life, and it's kind of regular, like it's kind of like mine. And so if she can do it, I can do it. Or
Right.
maybe she knows a way how, or yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. When they see something in us, this is the law of attraction. It's because it exists in them, or else they wouldn't be able to see it in us. And so they're drawn to it for that reason. And that's why I like to say we are walking permission slips, because what you're doing is showing somebody else possibility.
That's
You're showing them where maybe there was something that they hadn't even considered or realized, and they see it in you.
So what did you do after you finished with basketball? Or do you still play basketball? I don't even know. Maybe you're part of a rec
So
league.
it's so funny that you're asking. I just shot around 2 nights ago. I was at visiting some friends, because I'm here visiting family and friends. And they had a basketball court in their backyard, and there was basketball just sitting there. And I was like, I can't help myself. And so I went over there and I shot around, and it had been a while. So it took me a couple shots
Did
before I
you?
started making some baskets, but it came back, just like riding a bike. Um, so, it was interesting because I played in middle school, I played in high school, and then I did get a scholarship to go to college and play, which was one of the most incredible experiences, because I just didn't realize who I would become when I was playing basketball with a team that was away from my family for the first time, right? I'm living on my own, I'm being independent. So you rely on your team more than I even did in high school. My team in high school, they were my friends, they were my basketball teammates, but in college, they were my family too. You're off on your own for the first time. And so there was a different bond with that group. So ultimately, what I did after I finished college is I've stayed in touch with all of those girls that I played basketball with, stronger than any other relationship that I've ever had in my life. Like we really bonded together. So when I first finished college and stopped, I wasn't on a team anymore. It's like, oh my gosh, I've played this my whole life. What am I going to do now? What do I do in the winter time? What do I do when I would normally be playing basketball? So I coached the first 4 years that I got out of college. I was a basketball coach for a 7th grade team. We were amazing. I think our record was like 80-2 over 4 years.
Wow.
So the 4 years that I coached, we had an amazing winning record. I mean, of course I was the coach, so I'll claim some of the credit, but I was coaching in a system that was just wonderful, right? From a very early age, youth basketball was a big thing. So I was blessed with a lot of very good players, but it was fun. But what I learned is I liked being the player more than I liked being the coach. So although I loved coaching and I loved what we did together and what we created, it wasn't the thing that I wanted to stick with, at least at that time. It wasn't where I wanted to put my focus. And I can't say that I kept playing basketball on like leagues or anything, but I always played. I was a teacher. I always played when we had like teacher student basketball games. I was always available for a pickup game with anybody who was like, oh yeah, let's play. I'm like, all right, I got you. And then when I moved to California, I really started to play a lot more beach sports. So I just wasn't doing as much basketball anymore. I played flag football, I played beach volleyball. But like I said, 2 nights ago, I went and shot around and it was still in me. So it's
Still
there. It
so
never really
fun.
leaves you. Yeah.
This brings up a couple of questions because I can remember my husband was an elite athlete in track and field. And when he stopped, there had to be an identity shift.
Yes.
I had words of wisdom from someone who was an Olympian in synchronized swimming. And she said it took a solid 2 years. Like the first year, you get to figure out, well, how do I do September when things normally start? How do I do my competition season? And then the second year, you kind of integrate what you did the first year, not being that athlete. And so I had experienced that from moving geographically quite a lot. Like it usually took 2 years to kind of really assimilate. So I've kind of taken 2 years as kind of like a guideline, like a template is like, don't make any decisions, just give it 2 years kind of thing. So for a player who makes a transition to a coach, it's a different mindset, it's a different identity. Sometimes they're not prepared because the shift is not of their decision. Maybe it's an injury, maybe whatever, they're cut from a team. What kind of words of wisdom would you have about making that identity shift?
Such a good question and such a great point, because I've experienced this in sports and I've experienced it in other areas of my life. And if you're not aware of it, it is a very difficult transition. Because if you're not aware that you have identified in a certain way, that your ego sees you in a certain way, it can be very confronting and very challenging if you don't realize that that's an opportunity to evolve. That's an opportunity to kind of expand into something new and different. It's also a grieving process.
Oh my God, I might actually cry because we were at a social function. Rich was there with me, and he had already retired. And there was a very high level football player there, and they knew each other from back in the day because they kind of trained in the same facility. And he said, all athletes die twice. And I just burst into tears because he had, in that sentence, he had encapsulated something that I went through with Rich, but I didn't have words for it. Like I knew I had a feeling. I knew I was very weirded out. The other thing is when Rich retired, he didn't really talk about it. Like he made the decision on his own and he kind of made the announcement on his own. So like I was as like I might have been more surprised than some other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh, well, I'm not the support person for this person who does this anymore.
Yeah.
And that is real. That is a real grieving process.
It's very real. Like losing anything else in your life, you're letting go of something that, not in every case, but in many cases, was probably a very incredible experience.
Oh,
Was probably very rewarding in many ways. And you see yourself in life as that. And so you tend to get a lot of your validation and your worth from it. And when you aren't that anymore, you've left this place inside of you that you've got to reconnect with the fact that regardless who I am in life, regardless of how I show up, my worth is the same no matter what. But that's part of the grieving, is you're letting go of needing that in order to feel worthy. You're letting go of needing that in order to feel like you matter and like you can show up in life. And, it's like being low man on the totem pole again, because you had established yourself and you had become very familiar with that version of you. And now this is a new you, not only that the world is getting to know, but that you're getting to know. And quite often you don't have any idea who that is yet. Like when you asked me, what did you do after basketball? Literally at first I was like, gosh, what did I do? And at the time, I remember kind of thinking, gosh, what am I going to do? Of course, I had gotten a job and I had, after I graduated, so I had things to focus on that I was growing into in my life. But again, the question that comes up a lot is, who am I? And that makes the grieving process a little bit more challenging when you're not quite sure, well, who am I now? What should I do? How do I want to show up in the world? Where is my worth besides just as a basketball player or track and field or, whatever it is. So it's isolating in some ways. It's an opportunity for growth, but it feels challenging.
I love what you said because I always circle back, like after the initial, abruptness of news. I always think things happen for us, not to us. And so when you say it's what I'm hearing you say is it gives you a chance to do some inner work on worthiness and to know that our worthiness is a consistent through line and allow the ego death around that
Yeah.
persona. So after basketball, I know you had another transition and you just mentioned teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's another persona you take on.
Which was interesting in and of itself because I was 22 when I started as a high school teacher. And I had kids that were 19 sitting in my classroom. And I was like, who am I to be? You know what I mean? It was a very interesting time in my life where I had to grow up maybe faster than I realized or wanted to in some ways, because now I am the role model. I was the person at the front of the classroom. You know, one of the most challenging, I would say, experiences early on as a teacher is, number one, just knowing that kids don't need another friend. They need a role model. They have plenty of friends. They didn't need me to show up and be their buddy, right? Of course, I want to develop a relationship with them and have rapport with them, but I was a different person in their life than just another friend. And at 22 years old, you know, I've got friends. I mean, I was in college with people who were 19 and 20 years old that were still my friends, that we were like hanging out together. And here I am, I've got kids in class that are 17, 18, and 19 years old, you know? So it was like, oh, okay, I have a new role that I'm stepping into, and I'm a role model. They already have enough friends. And for me, one of my toughest experiences was, so on the day of 9/11, I was teacher in the classroom. And I didn't mention this yet, but I'll tell you now, my dad was my principal where I taught.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Not only did he influence me in basketball, but even when I went in to be a teacher, he was the principal of the school where I was working. And the morning of 9/11, I had a planning period. So I had a free period that I didn't have any kids. And I went to the copy room and I'm making copies. And this one guy that I see, he goes, did you see that there's some planes that hit the Twin Towers in New York City? And I was like, no. And I was busy. I had things going on. So I just dismissed it. I was like, no, I didn't see that. That's awful, you know, whatever. And I kept going. And then I was walking down the hallway and every classroom had TVs on and they were all watching. And I stopped in a couple of classrooms and I'm like, what's going on? And you know, and then I go back to my classroom and the kids come to, the bell rings, kids come to class and they're like, Miss Cramer, did you hear what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what's happening. And they were like, they think it might be terrorists, you know? And then we found out there was a plane that was flying somewhere over Ohio that they couldn't find. And in that moment, I just remember thinking like, I want my dad. Like, I want to be comforted. I want to know that this is okay. But here I am standing in front of 30 kids and I'm now the one who's looking at them saying, what? I don't know, you know? And I like ran into my dad's office in between periods. I was like, what do we do? What do we do? He's like, Nick, you're their teacher. You're there, you know, you don't know what's going on any different than they do, but be there for them and help them. And I just remember thinking in that moment, like, wow, I'm now that person that others are looking to for direction, for comfort, for guidance. So yeah, that was an identity shift for sure. You go from being the student to the teacher, and it was fun in many ways because it's like, ooh, I'm in charge. So that feeling was cool, you know.
As much as 9/11's etched in all of our memories and what we were doing at the time, you will be etched in their memories as part of
the
tapestry of that day.
Well, you know, I have to share this. What was really interesting is because you're right. And that whole, they're etched in my mind because I remember it was like, we were going through this together. Like, what is this? You know, like anybody on that morning that was realizing things, who they were with, they probably have that in many ways etched in their mind. Well, I was a geometry teacher. Okay. So math was my thing. I have no idea still to this day why this happened the way that it did, but the answers to our homework assignments, I would always put up on the overhead. That's how long ago I was a teacher. We still had overhead projectors. I'd put the answers up on the overhead and the kids would come in and check their homework. So that day, I put the answers up on the overhead for the first period. Nobody says anything. Nobody cares. No big deal. Then that's when the planes hit the Twin Towers. And then the next class comes in and I put the homework up again. The very first answer, I told you I was a geometry teacher, but for some reason, the very first answer to our homework that day was terrorist. And the reason I say I'm a geometry teacher, because normally it would be like, you got an answer that's a shape or you got an answer that's a number. Well, we happen to be in the part of geometry where we were learning about reasoning, right? Because you've got to use proofs to reason through your argument. And the question was just asked to read a paragraph and then pull something. I don't remember what the question was, but it was like, pull out whatever the answer was from that paragraph. And the answer was terrorist. And so as my kids are coming in and I put the homework up and they're all looking at it going, oh my God, Miss Cramer, this is so weird. Did you know that they think it might be terrorists that like, ran? And I was like, no, but how is that our answer right now to the homework assignment? It was just the weirdest thing. And to this day, I don't know why that coincidence happened, but that was really interesting to me. So I know that probably is etched in a lot of their minds too, like of all days to have an answer in a math class that was terrorist. That was the day.
Yeah, the things that are etched in our memories are things with high intensity emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
yeah, lots of things from that day.
Yeah, for sure.
Can we circle back to another question about your dad and your grandfather?
Yeah.
When people know that you are a Cramer
Mm-hmm.
and you're a basketball player, like when you're back in the role of being a basketball player, and they know that you come from some lineage of basketball players, how did you deal with that without it being the comparison game or I don't know if this is the right word, but like a burden for expectation?
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Maybe
Because
it's a
my
little
dad
different because you're different genders. Like,
I was just going to say that it was probably a little bit more challenging for my brother in certain ways. He was a good basketball player too. He and I both were coached by my dad. My dad was very successful and very well known in Ohio as a basketball coach. So just that in and of itself, like you said, the name, oh, you're a Cramer. Oh, you're Roger's daughter.
that's what I mean.
That's who I was, which honestly, Linda, I loved it because it gave me I saw it as an immediate advantage. I saw it as the differentiating factor. So I go to a camp in 5th grade with a bunch of other kids and somebody's like, oh, she's Roger Kramer's daughter. So I didn't actually take it as pressure to perform. I saw it as an advantage. And I thought, they know my dad. That's cool. They know I'm good at basketball. That's cool. They know I'm dedicated. That's cool. There was like an automatic, expedited connection, I guess, to me being a player.
That's interesting because I think sometimes it can be the flip side and it's kind of like, oh, you don't even see me as my own person. You see me as Roger Kramer's daughter. It's like, hey, I'm here. I'm a person.
Well, you know what? And I think you'll really appreciate what I'm about to say. I don't think I ever left that identity until I left and moved to California. It almost wasn't even possible for me to not be that here where I grew up, where everybody knew him. Even when I was a teacher, I mean, I told you he was the principal at the school and he was a very well-loved principal. So again, I was Mr. Kramer's daughter, like, so it was always a thing. And it never was a burden for me, but I didn't realize how much of my identity it was until you move 3,000 miles across the country where nobody knows that person. It means nothing. It means nothing. Yeah. So that was probably even more challenging for me because then it was like, well, who am I without that?
There you go. There's another
mm-hmm.
shift or
yep.
2-year window opportunity.
Yep.
How did you make a decision to go from being a teacher, your next iteration? Because that's around the time I met you. Yeah. Our paths crossed kind of in that version.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually there was a step in between because I went from teaching to my corporate job, which is just a couple years before I met you. And that was probably one of the most interesting transitions I had ever made for many reasons. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation in of itself, but I had taught for 15 years.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm. I taught for 15 years, and the last 3 to 4 of them were awful.
Oh.
In one way. I didn't want to be there anymore, and I didn't know it or wasn't admitting it to myself. Now, and when I say awful, listen, my students were amazing, but everything about like who I was in the classroom and what we were doing, I loved and they loved. I was still showing up for what I loved about teaching. But for me personally, for my path, I was having a lot of resistance because I didn't want to admit that I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't know that there was anything else I could do. I'd already been doing that for so long. It was my identity. Not only was my dad and my grandpa athletes, they were teachers. Education is in my family. So for me to start having these feelings of like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, no, 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 no. I can't do anything else. No, 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 no. You know, and you just keep shoving it down. And you know, if you don't listen the first couple times to the whispers, then it gets louder and it gets louder and it's louder until it's screaming. And I allowed it to get to exactly. I mean, it was physically, emotionally, mentally, like just very, very hard for me. And it was showing up in every way. And I got to the point where I was like, I just can't be here anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. But what I also had started to really be drawn to is the competitor in me never left. So I was attracted to sales. So here I am as a teacher, loving my students, loving what I got to do to change and impact their lives, but knowing there was something that I was meant for that was bigger than that. And honestly,
Math every single day.
selling math, that's literally what I did. I sold math. And you know, it took me until years later to understand that that was a sale. But you know, my students, even in the classroom, they were like, Miss Cramer, you should be a life coach. Miss Cramer, you should be a speaker. Miss Cramer, they were seeing things in me that I was afraid to see in myself, that I was afraid to admit, because that meant I'd have to be bigger than who I was. And I could play small, even though I wasn't happy there. But I had a lot of friends in sales and it sounded so cool. And then we'd go to happy hours and they'd be like, I'm #1 this quarter, or I just signed the biggest contract I've ever had in my career. And I was like, I gave a math quiz. Woo. Like, I just wasn't feeling the excitement around it anymore, but I was hearing them compete. I was hearing them play games. That's what it sounded like to me. And I was like, I want to do that. But I had this limiting belief that, well, I've been a teacher for 15 years. I can't take the pay cut. I don't have the skills. What if I don't know how to sell? What if it doesn't work out? I had every reason why. And I stuck to those reasons until one day I played volleyball, beach volleyball, with one of my friends. I'd known him for a long time. We'd never played a sport together. We watched sports together, but we never played one together. We won. We step off that court, off the beach. And he goes, what just happened? I said, what? He goes, what did I just witness in that game? I said,
what just happened and who are you? Where is my friend Nick? I have seen this version of you. So this is why I think it's intensely funny.
And I just looked at him. I said, well, I like to win. He goes, like to win? I don't even know what that was. That was like, you were like a bat out of hell. And I laughed, you know, and I said, well, you know, again, I'm competitive. I like to win. He goes, have you ever thought about sales? I looked at him. I'd never had that conversation with anybody. I said, yeah, I've always wanted to do it, but I'm a teacher. He goes, so? I said, well, I don't have any experience. And if you want to get a sales job, you got to have experience. He goes, would you go on an interview with my boss if I got you one? I said, yeah. You would do that? He goes, I would love to do that. That's what I feel. Yes. He said, after watching what I just saw, you are made for that. I was like, really? You think I could do this? So he gets me an interview with his boss. Well, mind you, I've got nothing but 15 years of teaching experience. So I've got a resume that I'm walking in with that just says teacher, 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 right? But I get myself ready for the interview. I get my hair done. I go get a suit and I walk in. And I think this guy, the guy that interviewed me, his name's Ruben. I think he was just doing a favor for my friend. I think my friend was like, hey, I think this girl would be great. She doesn't have experience, but will you interview her? And I think the guy was like, yeah, just whatever. So I go through the whole interview, and we get to the end, and he goes, I'm pleasantly surprised. You knocked this out of the park. And I was like, and I said, wow, thank you. He goes, but I'm going to have a hard time hiring you over the 89 internal people who want this position because your resume just says teacher. I'm like, shot to the heart. It was the one thing I was so afraid he was going to say. And I said, well, I sold high school math to teenagers for 15 years, and that wasn't an easy sell. And that came through me, Linda. I did not have that plan. I could not have prepared for that. It literally was in that moment, God speaking through me. And when I said it, I was like, oh, and he goes, oh, wow. That's good. That's good. I said, well, yeah, nobody wanted to buy math. Those 30 kids every hour on the hour that were coming to my class, they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to do that. And I had to find a way to get them to do it. He goes, that's good. He goes, will you go on a ride along with one of my guys? I said, yeah. He goes, can you write a 30, 60, 90-day business plan? And I was like, absolutely. So I talked myself back in that one sentence with that one thing. So of course I walk out and I call my friend. I'm like, hey, I moved on to the next round. He's like, oh my God, of course you did. That's amazing. And I said, yeah, what's a 30, 60, 90-day business plan? Don't worry, I'll help you write it. But that was the first time. And now, like I said, years later, I can't believe how impactful that statement was. And I said it in the moment to him to get me to move on to the next thing. But now it's like, it taught me more than anything because sales is relational. And so everything that I teach now, I really fully embody and understand. It's never transactional. There was no transaction in that classroom.
Yes.
It was all about the relationship. And that's what selling is. So that was an interesting experience to say something that advanced me in the interview process, but really left a big impact on me.
And what industry was that in?
That was in the finance industry. And I didn't get that job. So what happened is, long story short, another friend of mine, so that guy, his name was Rob, the guy who wanted me to work for that company. And my friend Jared, who I had grown up with, I'd known my whole life. He was like a brother to me. He had always said, you should be in sales. You should be in sales. And he was a sales manager. And I was like, I have my summers off and I live at the beach. I'm good. I'll just stay as a teacher. Right. But he always said it. He's like, Nick, you'd be great at this. I've known you your whole life. You'd be great at this. Well, Rob, Jared, and I all knew each other. So after I get this interview with Rob's company, it's Wells Fargo was the company. We go to watch a football game that weekend. We're all hanging out. And I go to Jared. I'm like, guess what? I interviewed for a sales job. And I think he's going to be so proud of me. Right. I'm like, I did what you always told me I'd be good at. I went and had an interview. He goes, you did what? I said, I interviewed for a sales job. I thought you told me I'd always be good at it. He goes, I don't want you to have a sales job. I want you to work for me. I want you to be in sales for me. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, and then Rob walks over. He's like, yeah, did she tell you? I got her an interview with my boss and da-da-da-da. And Jared's like, yeah, do you guys have a car package? Do you do a laptop and a cell phone? And they start comparing like package features of like what they're able to offer me. And literally, and you said this, heightened emotion, it really leaves an imprint on our mind. I will never forget standing there in the middle of that bar, watching the two of them compare. And I thought, they both think I can do this. They both think I can do this. So that was a huge aha for me to realize that they really did. So here's me going, I don't know. So Jared looked at me after that conversation and he goes, do you want to come visit our office and just meet the team and see what you think? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And I looked at him and I said,
lifelong friends.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I said, what do you guys sell? I didn't know. Just knew we worked for a company. I said, what do you guys sell? He goes, we sell coffee. Now, what I didn't tell you is 2 months before that, for the first time in my life, I had started drinking coffee.
Of course you had. Perfect.
So I said, what do you guys sell? He goes, coffee. I said, of course you do. Because I always said, if I did go into sales, it would have to be something I really believed in. It would have to be something that I am a consumer of, but I couldn't possibly sell something that I didn't believe in. And so that was one of those things where I was like, I hear you, universe. I hear you. I'll take your next breadcrumb. And I went and visited him and his team in the office and everybody was great. And then it just so happened that the area I lived in had just opened up in terms of territory. So he's like, hey, you could also work in your in your area where you live.
Yes,
So
it happened.
that was the transition. So I went to Aramark, and my one goal was to be number one. That was it. I was like, I just want to be number one. And that's a really, really, really fun thing to say right now. But when you say it in a room full of sales veterans who've been doing this their whole lives, you get laughed at. You're the laughing stock of the room. Because I walked in on day one and they were like, why did you leave teaching to come here? And I was like, because I want to be number one in the nation. They were like, that's cute, Pollyanna. And I was like, well, is it hard? And they were like, we've been in sales our whole lives and we've never done it. And I was like, oh, well, where there's a will, there's a way. I was so naive. I had no clue.
But still, I know this story. So tell the listeners how this story evolves, because it's a good one. It
is a good one. Thank you. And it's good because for me, although it's my story, to me, it paints the possibility for anybody, wherever you are in life, to believe in yourself, to go after it. Because honestly, you know the story. I shouldn't have done what I'm about to tell. And when I say shouldn't have, I shouldn't have been able to, but I believed it. I believed it above everything else, right? So without any sales experience, and actually even without a manager, and with a lot of other things that I won't even get into that were like kind of working against me that first year, like I ended up in the hospital. I had no health insurance. I had 6 figures in hospital bills. I was recovering from the hardest thing I've ever recovered from. It was pancreatitis and a kidney infection and sepsis. Like it was just, it was like, let me start this sales job and then get really, really sick. Right. Within a year and a half, I became number one. And you know, what's really fascinating to me is when I look back, I really didn't do it in a way other than my way. Like I did things. Of course, I learned what my company wanted me to learn and I learned things along the way. But, you know, the story I always tell is I wrote a lot of handwritten notes and I connected with people. See,
I was going to say, make sure you tell the story about this part, because that conversation is etched in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. It's so that's what I would do. I would meet with people and then I would write notes and just say, hey, great meeting. Because in my mind, I'm like, we've got text, we've got email, we've got so many different ways. And everybody that I know that I'm competing with is communicating in that way. What's a way that I can reach out and connect with people and stay front of mind that they maybe aren't getting? And I've always been a big fan of handwritten notes. Even when I was a teacher, I wrote them every single day to my students. And so I was like, you know what? On Mondays, when we have to go into the office, instead of making calls, I'm first going to write my notes to whoever I met with the week before. So that was my routine. I'd sit down, I'd write my notes. And my buddy, Kevin, who sat right next to me, he's the first one that made fun of me when I said I wanted to be number one. He was the one that was like, oh, you want to be number one? And like made fun of me and teased me, you know, and he sat right next to me. And so every Monday, here I am writing my notes. And one day he looks over, he goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing notes to the people I met with last week. He goes, we're supposed to be making calls. I said, you do you and I'll do me. I'm writing these notes and then I'm going to make my calls. He goes, you're going to get in trouble. I said, bug off. So I kept writing my notes, doing my thing. And I did it every Monday religiously. So cut to a year and a half later, a lot of other things happened in the meantime, but cut to a year and a half later. And my company announced me as the number one salesperson in the company.
Nationwide.
Out of hundreds of people, here I am and I'm number one. Right. And I'm like, holy guacamole. And it was like the most amazing feeling. And it was so excited. And then Kevin comes up to me. He goes, so how'd you do it?
He sat in the desk right next to you for the whole year and a half.
That's it. I said, what do you mean, how did I do it? He goes, how'd you do it? What's your secret? I said, Kevin, you've been sitting next to me for the entire last year and a half. You and I share an office. What do you mean? How did I do it? You saw everything I did. He goes, you're going to try to tell me those handwritten notes made you number one? I said, are you going to try to tell me they didn't? And he just shook his head and walked away and got all grumbly. But my answer is, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And you know as well as I do, Linda, like if somebody went out right now and just started writing handwritten notes, like that alone isn't going to make you number one. But like essentially, is that the thing? Yeah.
So this
it's the intention.
Sorry.
No, it is. Sorry. I just said it's the intention, right? And everything that goes with that.
That's what I was going to say. This is a beautiful story. I hope you tell it often because it encapsulates so much around energy as everything. It's not just doing the notes and checking it off the list as in, oh shit, I have to write notes. It's Monday, you know, like it's not the doing, it's the being, and your energy of being, oh, I'm so grateful that we met last week. Like, I'm really grateful for the connection.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that sets you apart in your work now. And I shouldn't jump ahead, but as a sales coach, because you really bring home the idea that it's about the relationship, and the relationship is the feeling. It's not what did we do? What did we say? What was the transaction? Did I show them a sample? Did I leave them with a website or a link? It's like, no, Nick is memorable. I want to have another interaction with her. I'm looking forward to my next connection time with her. I know that it'll be fun. I know, all the things. And so that whole cascade of people know you, they like you, they trust you, they want to do business with you. You compress all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the energy in the note.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you just expressed that. That's exactly what it was. Because when I was writing them, I was feeling that. I was thinking that. There was so much energetically in terms of intentionality that went into that. Right. And, you said it earlier, a heightened emotional experience definitely impresses upon people. And so that is a way to help people experience a feeling associated with me.
Yes.
And here's the other thing, and this is so important in sales. Like, at the end of the day, what I realized is they were going to buy that thing from somebody. Why shouldn't it be me?
So true. Yeah.
Why shouldn't it be me? I'm not selling a TV to a blind man. I'm not selling ice to I'm not selling them something that they don't need. I'm actually one of the people that has something to offer that they need. And they're going to buy it from somebody because they need it. I'm the best person that they could buy it from because nobody cares as much as me. Nobody wants to help them as much as I do. Nobody is going to hold their hand the way that. So I saw that as like, I wouldn't want them to buy from anybody but me because I know I'll take the best care of them.
Well, that's interesting to hear your side of it, because on the consumer side, when I make a buying decision, I'm thinking, this is the buying experience that I would like.
Mm-hmm.
Because this buying experience influences how I interact with this thing.
Yes.
So when I'm going to give you an example. I have some furniture upstairs. There's one piece that I purchased when I couldn't afford it. So it was kind of in the energy of, I'm going to kind of stretch myself. I'm going to go on a payment plan. And so it's kind of like, don't spill anything on this. Like I don't feel like I really enjoyed it to its fullest. And then there's another piece of furniture that was kind of impulsive. I knew I wanted a piece like that. And then I had like a good, better, best kind of option. And I paid more for the best piece I could find from the store that I wanted the experience from. And the salesperson who was helping me, who was relaxed and funny, and it was like all the vibe. And now it sits next to that other piece of furniture, and I totally enjoy it. Like, I don't have any angst about it. I'm not like, oh, don't scuff it. Don't put anything hot on it. Don't put anything cold on it. Don't put any, like, I'm not weird about it. But the other piece, it is the energy of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're making the buying experience more pleasurable on something that people are already going to buy, like corporate, I don't know if you call it industrial coffee, but like corporate coffee.
Yeah.
going by it anyway. Why not enjoy when Nick comes in once a quarter or whatever, rather than, oh, it's that guy. He's coming in. How can I be too busy to see him?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. That's always who I wanted to be to people. I wanted it to not be a nuisance that I was stopping by, which, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, there were times that I still was, right? Like not everybody's right for us to do business with, but like for the most part, it's like, how can I, of the impression of increase, right? Have you heard of that? Like the impression of increase is like, how can I leave somebody with more in every interaction? How can I essentially deliver some level of value, even if sometimes it's just a smile or a wave or a how are you or a checking in and being present with somebody, right? Like, how can I practice the impression of increase in every interaction that I have in my life? And, and it started when I was a teacher, because I would say to my students, I'm like, hey, you got to be here and I got to be here, right? You want a diploma, I want a paycheck, we're all here. And secretly, we're not all like, we're choosing to be here, even though we may not love the material. So let's find a way to make it fun. If we have to be here, let's have fun while we're doing it. And I kind of feel that same way in everything that I do in life. Like, how can I make this more fun? Or how can I help this person in some way by increasing their experience in the world because of an interaction with me?
That's a beautiful thing. And I'm sure there are people who are going to listen to this and that's going to stay with them, because this is a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah.
So we haven't hit another iteration in your life. So you went from coffee being number one sales in like national in that company. And then
I started helping other people because they were like, how'd you do it? Can you help me? Right. Or my manager would bring on a new person to our team and say, hey, can you train them? And so there was equal parts curiosity and interest in getting support from me because I had done something that, a veteran person wanted to do. And there were people who were like, hey, I'm brand new. Who better to train with than the number one person in the nation? And what I started to learn is, first of all, it was like the teacher in me reappeared. I really realized how much I loved teaching and sharing. And secondly, they were all going on to be really successful, like number 6 in the nation, number 3 in the nation. I coached somebody who went on to be number 1 in the nation. And which that one was really cool because they offered me a promotion when I was number 1 and I didn't want it. I didn't want the different title. I didn't want the difference. I was happy where I was. And they hired, since I turned it down, they hired somebody that took over the position, and she'd never worked at our company before. So she came to me and she was like, will you help me? So I trained the person that took the position that I turned down, and she went on to be number 1. So there were things that I started to notice that I loved and enjoyed about it, and that people were getting great results because of what I was helping them with. Yeah. And at that time, I also, I had another interest in my life around health and wellness. And so I wanted to become a health coach. And so that's what I said that my first bonus check was going to do for me, is it would buy me my health and wellness certification program. And when I became certified, what I learned is most health and wellness coaches didn't go into it to sell. They went into it because they like to help people get healthier with their hormones. They like to help people learn workouts that they want. They were doing things that they were passionate about, but sales was the piece that had to be intact for them to do more of that. And they didn't want to do it, and they felt uncomfortable with it. So because it's so important to me, and I knew so many health coaches because I'd gone to school with them, I was like, well, just do this, or just do this, or just do this. And I'd start giving them recommendations and advice. And finally, one of them looked at me and she was like, you need to do this. And I was like, do what? And I was still in my corporate job. I was still, just doing some health coaching on the side. I didn't see at all what she was seeing. She goes, you need to help people learn how to sell. Health and wealth, we don't know how to sell. And you're so passionate about it. I said, no, I don't want to be in sales anymore. I want to get out of corporate. I want to be a health coach. She said, Nick, if you help health coaches learn how to sell, you are a health coach. You are still making the world a healthier place, because you're empowering people that otherwise are not doing anything. They have a gift. They have something that they can share to help others get healthier, and they're not doing it because they don't know how to sell. If you make that connection for them, if you bridge that gap, you are making the world a healthier place. And I was like, done. I can get behind that. And so that's when I really fully embraced, I'm a sales coach. And I wouldn't have seen it the same way had it not been pointed out to me. But that's really what I see is I bridge the gap for people to do the thing that they really, really care about and give them the ability to go help more people.
I
Because
think this
that's
is
it.
a beautiful symphony. Like you've come from being a team player to being a coach to being a teacher to being in sales, and now you're a health sales coach.
Yeah. Actually, and then it expanded more. And so I started with health and wellness coaches, and then it turned into just women in general were coming to me, even if they weren't specifically, like I consider life coaches, anybody who helps someone improve their life. To me, you're working in health and wellness. So I'm casting a wider net, but really now it's all about helping women in a bigger way too, because to me, we just have a big opportunity to step into our power that we haven't really stepped into fully. And it's incredible to learn and understand how to share our gifts in a bigger way with people who really need them. And that's the piece for most people that bridges that gap, right? It gets them in front of more people and helps them change lives.
This is a lot of magic. So do you do this in workshops, in retreats, in classrooms, online? How do you deliver this goodness?
I do it in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So I actually do a couple of different things now, and mainly online, because I like to, be able to just give people the experience of flexibility around, what they're doing. And I think that makes it really easy on everybody. But anyways, so I do virtual work and I do in-person work as well. So I have workshops around exactly what to say, which is a really cool new part of my world. And I'm very excited about it. And basically teaching people the language of influence and persuasion. So I have some virtual options and in-person options with that as well.
This is so good. Do you have some recorded options if people want to binge?
Yes, I have a couple of different places. My YouTube channel has a ton of really great videos on it, all around sales conversations. I have a podcast that covers the same, similar topics. And those are great resources for people to just right off the bat, get some quick action steps that they can take and start making more conversions and having more fun selling. Because that's really what's important to me. It's like, when I was a math teacher, like we might as well have fun. Let's try to enjoy the math, and selling is how you help more people. So let's make it fun.
What's the name of your podcast?
My podcast is called Healthy Steps with Nicole.
Healthy Steps with Nicole.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And my YouTube channel is the Nicole Cramer. And for anybody who's listening, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram and send me a DM, I'll be happy to. I have a free discovery call template that is really incredible for using when you are having a conversation and looking to help somebody make a decision. So I'm happy to give that to anybody who reaches out.
Oh, this is excellent and juicy. So do you have anything coming up?
I do. I have a really cool 3-day extravaganza called Nail the Sale. And yeah, I love the name. I love what it's all about. Basically, I'm taking people through a 3-day experience of learning where they can start to make more conversions in their sales conversation. So how to start new conversations and really stay in the game, because to me, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and everything's about building that relationship and knowing what to say in the process. So 3 days of an extravaganza of learning how to convert more and make more sales and help more people. So that's coming up September 26th through the 28th. And again, I'm happy to share that link. Just reach out to me, DM me on Instagram and tell me nail the sale. And it's a free 3-day event.
Free.
Yeah.
That's very generous, because I know you have lots of goodness. Does it matter if people have a service or a product when they come to this?
Great question. People buy with emotion, whether it's a service or a product. So essentially the influence and persuasion pieces, skills that I'm teaching can be used no matter what you're selling. Even if you're trying to sell your kids on making their bed, like all of it's a sale. Not to go too much into it, but what a lot of people, myself included, think of with sales is transactional. They think it's a money exchange. It's you've got to make a hard decision. Somebody's trying to get you to do something. And we've all grown up with that stigma. We've all grown up conditioned to believe that salespeople are wrong. And so we kind of avoid actually leading people in a way that can really help them. But when we learn how to use our words to influence and persuade, I mean, listen, you can use the tools however you want, but we're all here to do good. And whether it's a service or a product, whatever it is that they're buying from us, it's to help their life in some way, right? It's to help them in some way that they see it's going to make their life better. So to me, selling doesn't matter if you sell a service or a product. It's all the same way.
That's beautiful. So in closing, I'm going to ask something that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. If you could leave one word, what would the word be that you choose?
Curiosity.
Nice.
Yeah,
I can see how you personify that word.
Thank you. I consider that a very big compliment because I think curiosity is such a beautiful way to show people that you care about them. And it's a beautiful way to stay out of your ego and stay in love and really approach a connection with somebody in a way of wanting to get to know them, wanting to learn more about them instead of coming with an agenda or coming with advice. And it's something all of us can get a lot better at.
I think you personify that.
Thank you.
There's a story I didn't tell earlier, and you and I met over a plate of Brussels sprouts. And we were both very curious about how are these tasting so good?
Best Brussels sprouts ever.
Trying to figure it out.
Yes. That was like our connection. Every time I eat Brussels sprouts, I think of you. Like again, a heightened emotional experience. Yeah. And we were just having the best time. We were connecting. We were genuinely curious about these amazing Brussels. Like I've always liked Brussels sprouts, but I literally have never tasted something like that. They were so good. And
I came from the other side. I didn't like them. And then we're sitting in the Ritz-Carlton in Miami, like home for neither one of us. And we're like, what's this?
So good. So look at that. You know what's so interesting too? That's such a connection for me on perspective shifting. You know, like you didn't like them at all.
No.
And that was like the catalyst for you, gateway, if you will, to Brussels sprouts. And I'd always liked them. And yet I had a whole new next level experience with them. So yeah, we totally bonded over Brussels sprouts.
Something that neither of us probably has in their regular day-to-day is we probably don't bond over food on our regular. Like we probably bond over movement with others.
Yeah.
Or business.
Yeah. So I would say probably both of those for sure. Yeah. But yeah, that was a fun one.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been rich and the world needs more Nicole Cramer. I've enjoyed you.
Thank you. The world needs more you too, Linda. You're incredible. I always love my time with you.
Oh, so good. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you liked some of what you heard today. If you can think of two people who would also be interested in these concepts, I encourage you to share these podcast episodes with them. I'll be back with you weekly, bringing you more, bringing you some very interesting guests, and always bringing you laughs and giggles and really good stories. If you want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram at Linda Gee-Hesketh, and I'll look forward to